had an opportunity to speak at church, and very, how can I tell you? I've done a lot of, I've done a lot of work um, coming out of the military, and then dealing with what I talked about, my depression and anxiety and all that, and suicide. Veterans take their lives, unfortunately, 22, almost 1 per hour, they say, a day. My brothers and sisters take their lives at that capacity. And so, yes, there is something that we deal with. There is something that we go through, but we're no different than you, right? Just because we're veterans and we serve this country, we're really not different from you. We all deal with something in our life that's important to us, and we seem to be stuck, and we don't know how to get through that or figure it out or make it work or whatever that is, right? We want power over our circumstances. Really, that's what I believe we're all looking for. How do I get power over my circumstance? But you got to be willing to do the work to figure out what that circumstance actually is. So we could say circumstance. I got my circumstances, you got yours, right? And we could just agree on the different circumstances, but not really specifically address what is going on. What do you care about? What is in the background, right? What is a racket? A racket is back in the days where they say the mafia would have this storefront, which is like a ice cream store in the front. So you got the ice cream shop in the front with the little old lady serving you scoops of ice cream, whatever. But that back door, what's going on in that back door is where all the guns and the drugs and all the stuff is in the back door. So the racket is the front is pleasant, it's nice, it's pleasing, it's ice cream shop style, but in the back of that door is guns and drugs and money and all kind of stuff being taken on. So can you imagine that some of us live our life like that? Like we pretend like everything is fine, but inside of our minds is turmoil, there's frustration, there's upsets, there's all these things that we deal with that then trigger depression and anxiety and thoughts and all these things, these circumstances, these concerns, these worries. How do we get free from that stuff? Well, first you got to be willing to do the work. You have to be willing to do the work. And then you got to find something that you believe in. Find something outside of your own life, out of your own self, something that you can connect to. I went to the Bible, I went to a personal development course, and I went to cognitive behavior classes. Those three. I took those three and I self-examined my life about the things that I was thinking about, things of my behavior that I didn't like anymore, and just kind of figuring out what was going on in my mind, right? You got to be able to do that work. You got to be willing. You got to be willing. So what is it? What is that constant thing that you keep talking about? So mine was relationships, right? I had this issue with relationships. And I discovered at 14, that 14-year-old peer age, my identity, right? Because after the 5-year-old and the 8-year-old could no longer talk to his mother and father, I went to my peers, my peer group for acceptance, for love, for whatever I was looking for that I wasn't getting from my parents. And so when I turned to my peers, what got my attention or what brought their attention to me was basketball. So I created this identity to play basketball, and I would play basketball at school, before school, recess, lunch, after school. Like you find me on the court. I'd be sweaty by the time homeroom, I'm already done, sweaty, right? But then one day, we're playing on the play yard on the ground, and this girl, catches my eye. We catch eye, make eye contact, whatever. I'm 14, y'all. And who knows how long that period was, but she became my girlfriend. So she was my girl all of a sudden. Like, I don't even know. I didn't even ask her to be my girlfriend. All I know is that we was just hanging out. And so hanging out with her, still playing basketball. Hanging out with her, playing basketball. Then I kept playing basketball. And so one day she tells me, hey, you're not paying attention to me. I'm like, oh, okay. So I make sure I pay attention to her, walk her to class, walk her home, walk her to the bus stop, whatever. But I'm playing basketball before school, recess, lunch, after school. So however another time went by, she reminds me again, hey, you're not paying attention to me. Oh, okay. So I do what I do to pay attention to her. And then one day, out of nowhere, my friend says, hey, you seen your girl? Like, nah, actually, I haven't seen her today. Yeah, because she's hanging out with him. I'm like, what? So I'm like, what? Wait, what? So I think that was like after lunch. So fifth period, I go to fifth period class. In between going to fifth and sixth, can't find her. Go to sixth period. After school, I catch her in the hallway, and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, hey, we're done. I'm like, boom, what happened? She's like, I told you, you're not paying attention to me. I'm like, oh, please, give me a chance, please give me one more chance, please. She's like, no, you don't pay attention to me. I'm like, okay, come on, give me one more, give me a chance. No, I told you you're not the guy for me. So in that moment of that little 14-year-old guy standing there in the hallway, and she tells me that I'm not the guy for her, what do I think? Well, I can tell you, I told myself I'm not going to be vulnerable for sure, and I got to defend myself in relationships. Now, why would a 14-year-old kid think that? Man, you talk about being heartbroken. You're talking about ninth grade. All your friends know, all your friends are around. I still got to go to grad night, Magic Mountain by myself. Like, do you understand how heartbroken? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe you never experienced that. That's mine. But in that moment, I made those decisions. And then how I adapted to those decisions was I became right about myself in relationships. Well, I'm not good enough. I'm not worth it. So why would somebody want to be with me, right? That's now in the background of relationships. But not just intimate relationships or girlfriend, but even family, friends, because I'm right about how relationships look because I don't have the capacity to pay attention to. I can't entertain this to the level that these girls want me to, so then why even bother? So I'm not going to be vulnerable, so I'm not going to approach a girl because I don't want to. I'm avoiding to be disappointed. I'm avoiding to be controlled and dominated at 14, but I don't even know that. I don't even, but this is how I'm living, and this is how those are my actions, right? So would I talk to a girl? No. I made up my mind that the woman chooses a man, so why even waste my time? If she wants to talk to me, she'll approach me. That's what I always thought. So I wouldn't even say anything. But there will be days that I was confident and be like, hey, what's up? Hey. And then, then there'd be a relationship. But then in that relationship, that 14-year-old decision about you can't be vulnerable, so I'm not really being open and honest about, how I feel. I'm trying to, entertain, so I'm not really expressing myself because of the things that I want to do, I'm not doing. All these things are going on. But what is it costing me? It was costing me to live like that. My aliveness, my vitality, my joy, my happiness. Avoiding trying to be dominated and controlled in a relationship. Being right about how I was in relationships. I was right, and I had proof that I was right. So how could you not tell me that I'm not good enough? She left me. My mom abandoned me. Remember that? My dad didn't love me. I got proof from the people that I love and I cared about that are not there. So imagine growing up with that type of mindset as a child, and then you get into relationships as an adult, and your behavior, and you're wondering why relationships aren't working, why you're sabotaging, why this girl, your male friend, like we don't even really see what's going on. But we do. Because we know in the back is where all the guns and drugs are, with all the hurt and shame and bitterness and upset is in the background, but our pretending in the front is like, oh, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm okay. So can you imagine 38 years I lived like that. 38. From 14 to 52. This breakthrough just happened on Wednesday. 38 years. And when I discovered it, all I could do was laugh. All I could do was laugh because I realized that was a decision that I made that had been shaping the views of relationships up until last Wednesday. I wanted to be right. I was defending myself. I was justifying myself for being right about how I viewed myself in relationships. You know what that looks like? Some people describe it as self-loathing. Self-loathing. So we talk about self-loathing, we counter that with self-love, self-esteem, all those self-affirmations that you see people do on social media to try and encourage themselves. Like, yes, we're supposed to do that. we're supposed to have self-love. But sometimes that self-love has been diminished way before that relationship. Maybe sometimes that self-love was diminished in the relationship, even with your own home or somebody who's you care about, that tells you, when you say, "Oh, look what I did. Look at what I'm proud." And then they say, "No, no, no, no. You can't talk like that. You can't don't say you're proud. Don't do that, because you might make, might make people feel bad because you're bragging about yourself and you're doing this." And it's like, no, so now that young child experience of themselves, that self-esteem is being diminished because they can't even acknowledge the great things that they've done to share with people because it might make somebody feel bad. Well, guess what? That is pretty true, because sometimes when you're confident and have self-confidence, the other person's insecurities show up in their own life, and then they put that off on you like it's your fault. Sometimes when you have self-confidence and self-love, some people think that you're arrogant because you're confident, but that's self-love. Like, you need to have that, because if you don't, then what happens is self-loathing is available, self-hatred. That's what I'm saying. In the background, what's going on in your mind? What things have you digested? What things have you taken in? What experiences have you had that you put in the future to make sure that never happens again? So in the future, I'm never going to be vulnerable, and I'm not going to be controlled and dominated, and I got to defend myself. That's what I was living into in relationships. So what do you think I'm looking out for? If you've almost been attacked by a tiger, you're gonna always be looking around the corner for a tiger, right? You're always gonna be looking for that, right? So imagine putting that in the future. See, we don't put our past in the past; we put our past in the future to make sure that we avoid situations. So when it starts to look like that, we know what I did, we know what we did to adapt to that. So that's how we behave, and then we wonder why all the relationships look the same. Well, you're the common denominator in your personal relationships, in your social relationships, in your work relationships, in your family relationships. Who's the common denominator in all those relationships? Yeah, you are. So you have to be able to self-examine yourself, and you have to find some principles. And what I did, I went to the Bible, and I found some keys to the kingdom. Those keys look like love, repentance, faith, obedience, purpose, fearless, and prayer, right? But that door, what was the door that I had to look when I looked in my mind? Was the door of hope. Now, when I looked at the door of hope in my mind, you would think hope is like, oh yeah, I hope this happens. I hope I find a relationship one day. I hope. But sometimes hope in our mind is like pie in the sky one day out there somewhere. It'll happen, I hope, and we'll leave it to the universe. That way I ain't got to be responsible for it. So if it doesn't happen, it's the universe that didn't give it to me. Yeah, well, that's how we talk and how we describe it, right? But what's in the back of that door of hope? Sometimes it's filled with furniture like shame, bitterness, embarrassment, you name it, for yourself. So unlocking that door of hope with love and examining that room full of stuff with love or from love, guess what I discovered? That stuff in there was just it's not true. There was hopelessness in there. There was despair. There was self-loathing. There was suicide. There was depression. There was anxiety in that door of hope, on the other side of that door. Because I wanted power. I was finally tired of that view of relationship of myself. So I wanted power over that circumstance called relationship. And that door was hope. And when I unlocked it with love, oh my gosh, I saw all the stuff that I filled that room with. Just trash. And this was trash that it wasn't even true. Because when I started to peel it off, yeah, you know what? She said what she said. She had every right. She had every right to not be with me because I wouldn't pay attention to her if that's what she needed. But the identity and the self-love that I didn't have for myself at that time is how I lived my life. And so self-loathing. So now imagine discovering that and then being able to articulate it like the way I'm articulating it, and then being able to say, you know what, guess what? You can live like that. You can live in self-loathing and hopelessness and despair. And if you choose to live like that, then you get the whole world that comes with that. You get to be right about it. You get to be right about yourself. You get to have that self-hatred. You get to have some self-confidence, but not all of it. You get to have all that stuff that comes with that world of hopelessness, right? You get to have that world, or you get to choose something else. And so what I did was I just owned all of that world of hopelessness. I owned the self-loathing. I owned the shame. I owned the embarrassment. I owned not being vulnerable. I owned it. I accepted it. Like, okay, that's the life that I pick. And when I picked that life, it no longer held me. I was able to then just be with it and be okay with it. And then that's why I laughed. Like, really? Do I really want to live that life of self-loathing? No, I don't. No one does. So guess what? I transformed that view of myself, and I get to now discover a whole nother level of self-love for myself. Self-love is very important. We see it, but it's not what you do. Sometimes we think we got to go take a vacation. We got to go over here and go do self-love like it's outside of us. Well, it's not. Self-love is generated from within, just like joy and happiness. So you have to generate that from within. If you look for outside of yourself, then it's temporary. If you're looking for that person to give you that love, imagine they got their own racket in the background of their own life. So they look fine in the front, as their appearance. But then when we talk, it's like, oh, wow, Farhan is cool, but man, where is his mind at? Where do those conversations come from? Why does he talk like that? Well, that's because in the back of the racket is the self-loathing, and it comes out of how I talk. I didn't even recognize it, but I heard people in my life would tell me. But I didn't even recognize it because I had proof that that's how my life was, and I was okay. Hey, I made it. I survived from 14 to 52 thinking that way. Trapped in my mind. Trapped in my mind. So can you imagine discovering that and applying the principles of the biblical principles and applying the landmark principles that I learned and applying the cognitive behavior classes about my thoughts and how exaggerated my thoughts were, and being able to do that in my mind and recognize it and peel it off like an onion and realize that it was true, but it wasn't the truth. That's at that point, there's freedom on the other side. There's peace. There's joy. There's happiness. My mind is so quiet right now. If you know what white noise sounds like, that's white noise. That's how I hear. That's all I hear in my mind now. Like my subconscious mind is like silent because I've been free from that one stronghold that has had me bound for like 38 years. Now, I got to do damage control, right? Because I got damage control. I've had failed relationships, failed marriages. Like I've got the damage to prove it too. But at the same time, I have self-love for Farhan. So if no one loves me, I love me. And that same love that I love myself with, I love God with. And God loves me with that same love. And then we go to our neighbors. So now you're talking about God who loves us. We love God. And then that same measure that I love myself, I can now measure that with the people in my life and love them. Right? So now you're talking about loving your neighbor. If you really have self-love, if we really had self-love in the world, most of the things that we deal with would not even be problems. There would not even be real issues. Because the self-love that you have for yourself, why would you want to shoot somebody? Why would you want to kill somebody? Why would you want to talk crazy to somebody? Why would you want to why would you want to do that if you have self-love? If you truly, truly, truly are present to your own self-love and the love that God provides for us, then how can you treat your neighbor less than you treat yourself? And to me, that's the start of the social ills and social issues that we deal with. There's a lack of self-love for ourselves first. If you can understand that, if you could examine your own life and look in your own life to what that looks like for you and why you feel in think about the way you think about yourself. You don't need forgiveness for everybody else. Forgiveness from yourself first. It's the intrapersonal relationship, not interpersonal. Interpersonal is between two people. Intrapersonal is between you and yourself. And you've got to be able to, and I don't like the word gotta, but in this case, you got to be able to look in yourself and examine yourself with those same views that you view other people. And again, it's a racket. It's ice cream shop in the front, guns and drugs in the back. This is the Ferran Dozier Show right here on KCA Radio, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Still waiting for my guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's 8:30. Again, the Ferran Dozier Show. Sickle cell trait. This part of the segment is brought to you by WDCONSCT.org, Sickle Cell Trait Awareness. Make sure you go and check out the website. I do have an event coming up. I'm speaking